So I believe we're all ready to go. 7 o'clock. Good evening, members of the public, and welcome to you and to members of the board and other members of this council and other councils, and to officers who are present to help this meeting. This meeting is being recorded and streamed live on our website. For those taking part, a few reminders, if I may. Hopefully you're taking part from a place where you will not be disturbed or distracted. When you are not actively participating in the meeting, I would ask members and officers to keep their audio and video turned off. Anyone wishing to speak should type an H in the chat box, please, rather than raise your hand visibly. Type an H in the chat box, and I will call you when it's your turn to speak. And if you could switch yourself back off again when you've finished speaking. All questions and contributions must come through the chair. And please remember to turn your video and audio on when I call you to speak. Any councillor with an interest in any item should declare it and keep their audio and video off when it's being considered. They will also not be included in any vote on the subject. When it comes to a decision on any of the recommendations or motions before us, I will assume that if no one says they oppose them, everyone will be in agreement. If anyone voices that they are opposed and wishes for a recorded vote, I will ask for that formal vote. And if someone wishes to abstain, they should also indicate that at that time. If we lose the live stream on the website at any time, I will adjourn the meeting for 10 minutes and hopefully the problem can be fixed. If it cannot, I will adjourn the meeting until a future date. Members of the public and members, you'll be aware that this is a reconvened meeting from the meeting of last Thursday, where we covered a number of items in great depth, in particular the master plan for Warren Farm. And I do thank you and all of those who were present at that time for your contributions and your patience as that meeting progressed. And thank you for reconvening this evening. So if we move to the agenda item 1 is attendance and apologies for absence. And I'll pass to Mr. Mayfield, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The members of the board presently showing as in attendance are yourself, Graham Pooley, Helen Ayres, Wendy Dayden, Ian Fuller, Simon Goldman, Rose Moore, Richard Porter, Ian Roberts, Andrew Sozin, Nora Walsh and Tom Willis. There are several other members of the council present as observers, including Councillor Mike McCrory, the cabinet member, several officers as well, Keith Nicholson, Director of Public Places, and from Planning Services, Jeremy Potter, Claire Stuckey, Neil Jordan and several other planning officers who may contribute as we go through the meeting. I haven't had any apologies for absence from anybody, but there are a number of members still missing who may well be joining us shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayfield. I do have one apology from Councillor Marie Goldman, for whom Councillor Natasha, sorry, I lost my place here. Councillor Natasha Dudley is substituting.
Thank you.
So if I may progress to agenda item 2, which is declaration.
Sorry for the interruption, but I did put a H and you obviously haven't seen it.
So sorry.
I stood in for Councillor Galley at the first half of the meeting, and I believe I'm standing in for him again at this one because he's not in attendance. So apologies from Councillor Galley.
Thank you. I'm sure that's noted, Mr. Mayfield.
Yes, Chair.
If we may move then to agenda item 2, which is declarations of interest. All members are reminded that they must disclose any interest that they know they have in terms of the items of business on the meeting's agenda, and that they must do so at this point on the agenda or as soon as they become aware of the interest. If the interest is a disclosable pecuniary interest, they are also obliged to notify the monitoring officer within 28 days of the meeting. Are there any interests that need to be declared, please? I see Councillor McCrory has a hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I need to declare a non-pecuniary interest as I'm a company member of the Farley Hospice. So that is in regard to the land north of Broomfield. But as Mr. Mayfield has pointed out, I am only here as an observer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCrory. Good to see you. So if there are no other declarations of interest, I will move to agenda item 3, which in fact we don't need to cover because I believe we covered those at the meeting of last Thursday, which were the minutes of the meeting of the 4th of June. Agenda item 4, public questions. Any member of the public may ask a question or make a statement at this point in the meeting, provided that they have been invited to participate in the meeting and have submitted their question or statement in writing and in advance. Each person has 2 minutes and a maximum of 15 minutes is allotted to public questions and statements, which must be about matters for which the board is responsible. I may disallow a question if it's offensive, substantially the same as another question, or requires disclosure of exempt or confidential information. If the question cannot be answered or written at the meeting itself, a written response will be provided after the meeting. Any member of the public who wishes to submit a question or statement to this meeting should have emailed it to this council 24 hours before the start of the meeting last Thursday, that is. All valid questions and statements have been published with the agenda on the website at least 6 hours before the start time and will be responded to at the meeting. Those who have submitted a valid question or statement are entitled to put it in person at the meeting, provided they've indicated that they wish to do so and have submitted an email address to which an invitation to join the meeting and participate in it can be sent. So thank you to those who have that question. Mr. Mayfield, if you just tell us which questions and statements you have which are to be heard at some point in some way.
Yes, Chair. In respect to the remaining items on the agenda, item 6, north of Broomfield Master Plan, we have a question to be put in person by Phil Jackson, and I believe he's present. On that item also, Councillor Edith Robertson from Little Waltham Parish Council has submitted a statement which has been published with the agenda on the website, and she'll be referring to that. I am aware that there's a possibility that a representative of Broomfield Parish Council may be joining the meeting, but he hasn't done so yet. On item 7, we have a statement from a gentleman, Mark East, who has asked me to read it out when we get to that item. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for that. If that's to be read out, then I suggest we leave it till the beginning of that item and move straight to the agenda item in respect of the master plan north of Broomfield, and ask Mr. Jackson if he would like to make his statement or read his question.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Phil Jackson and I am representing the Woodhouse Lane Management Company. As a resident of Woodhouse Lane and director of the Woodhouse Lane Management Committee, I would like to ask how the planning for the development on land north of Broomfield can be adopted without the prior confirmation of how the relief road into Broomfield Hospital is finalised. The original proposal was based around a relief road through the new development into Broomfield Hospital to aid traffic reduction on Hospital Approach. At the public exhibition, questions were asked of Bloor Homes and Chelmsford Planning Department to explain the design of the intersection with Woodhouse Lane. No definitive answer could be given as to what type of traffic could use this route or the actual location of the junction. Initially, we were told that it would only be for buses and ambulances, then informed it would also be used for hospital staff. No one could even answer who was down to build or pay for this part of the road. I believe this is now being discussed, but until the above has been confirmed and accepted, I believe the master plan should not be approved. We as residents of Woodhouse Lane strongly oppose the proposed closing of Woodhouse Lane. The current proposal consists of blocking the lane in 2 places, 2 turning heads and possible CCTV surveillance. The blocking of the road in these positions will purely create dead ends where criminal activities can take place or the dumping of rubbish. It is a narrow lane with dense tree lines and no lighting. There's a proposal to maybe install CCTV, but it was only be effective if monitored 24 hours. CCTV coverage would require 3 to 4 cameras in each location to cover the area, or fully functional cameras were not effective and require 24-hour control. This would also be very obtrusive. A much easier and cost-effective solution would be to change the junction from North Court Road onto Hospital Approach into a left turn only junction with a traffic management cover covering this area. Anyone turning right would receive a fixed penalty. Restrictions would also be put in place to stop traffic leaving the hospital into Woodhouse Lane. All that would be needed to achieve this is shaping the end of the road. This would then stop the rut run of traffic. With the proposed relief road, a simple cross junction or small roundabout be formed at the Woodhouse Lane junction. Signage would be installed at this junction stating no access to hospital via Woodhouse Lane. This would enable local residents the use of our existing lane rather than directing traffic through the new development and into the flow or traffic back through the hospital. Many thanks for listening to my question, and I look forward to hearing your comments and feedback.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you to you and your fellow residents of Woodhouse Lane for the time and effort I know you've put into following this process to this point and for the discussions that you've been participating in. If I could say to the board that I'm intending to do things in the following order for this item, I'd like to ask the officers at this point to introduce the item with a presentation covering the key aspects of the master plan, which is in front of you for discussion. I'd then like to invite councillors of other authorities who are here, and notably the Little Waltham Parish Council, to speak to their statement. And if John Blake from the Broomfield Parish Council arrives, I would ask him to do the same if he wishes, as the meeting has been brought forward from last week. And then I would like to suggest that the local members may wish to speak at that point and put forward their particularly local point of view, although I think I'm right in saying that all 3 members of that ward are actually here as members of the board, although I see Councillor Steele that Councillor Galley is here. Is it Councillor Galley or Councillor Gulliver you said that you were standing in for?
It was Councillor Galley, and he subsequently joined. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know whether you would wish to say something at this point in a minute after the Little Waltham Parish Council has said that on behalf of the parish council in your areas, the parish councils in your area. And then after that, the officers will respond to many of those points, I'm sure, and we'll move to the discussion on among policy board members. I'm aware that Councillor McCrory is here, as was said, as the Cabinet Member for Sustainable Development, and is very welcome to participate at any stage he believes is appropriate, and I will ask him from time to time if he wishes to do so. And I'm aware that Councillor Anne Davidson is also here as a Cabinet Member with responsibility for some aspects which are relevant, and if she raises her hand if she wishes to speak, then I will take that as well. But in the first instance, if I may pass to Mr. Jordan, who is going to make the presentation of the master plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. Neil Jordan, Senior Planner for Chelmsford City Council. If you bear with me a moment while I share my screen. Make sure I share the right one. Okay. So we're looking at the allocation site north of Broomfield, and this is a brief summary of the policy requirements, not the full policy. But we're looking here at a landscape-led, high-quality development that maximises opportunities for sustainable travel, and it's to provide around 450 new homes, including a minimum of 35% affordable housing, a neighbourhood centre, early years and childcare facility, a new vehicular access road to serve the development and to provide access into Broomfield Hospital, connections with foot and cycle routes and public transport priority measures, conserve and enhance the historic environment and provide a coherent network for public and informal green spaces. So I've jumped now straight to the master plan layout. So if you like, this is the main output from the master plan process, and this is part of an overall master plan framework document, which you have as Appendix 1 within the officer report. and that explains how and why the master plan looks the way it does. But what I'll just do now is run through a review some of the key components of that. So essentially, we start by looking at the site and surroundings to see what needs to be safeguarded. So it's a fairly open mind starting point. We're looking at the constraints, we're looking at the opportunities. Right at the outset, we establish which areas of the site we should not be developing to safeguard the existing green infrastructure. So these are areas that have more ecological or arboricultural value, and this is all based on survey work. This includes the field margins, the agricultural reservoir, the area to the southeast, which has a more meadow-like character compared to the farm fields making up the rest of the site. We looked at how we maintain a clear separation between the village settlements of Broomfield and Little Waltham. We want to keep a buffer to Woodhouse Lane and keep its rural character. And we want to see a generous buffer to the west and along the northern brow to address views across open countryside. Now, we know it's a policy requirement to provide a road connection with Blasford Hill and through the site into Broomfield Hospital from the north. This is a route for staff and operational traffic, not for hospital visitors, which is the principle agreed during the local plan examination. This road makes use of an existing opening in the field margin to minimise any impacts on that ecological corridor, which you can see there. There is provision for bus stops sited centrally, indicated by the yellow blob, to put public transport at the heart of the development. And as you can see, the road does continue down to join up with the hospital road network. I'll come back to Puddingswood in a moment. And that route is designed to accommodate buses, pedestrians and cycles as well as cars. Now we're looking for a connected layout approach to allow people to get around the development with ease. It also avoids an estate with only turning heads that can lead to difficulty for larger vehicles like refuse freighters getting around an estate setting. But I'd say probably more importantly are the knitting together of the various routes, not for cars, but for people on foot or by cycle. And these connect into the off-site routes to truly integrate the development with the wider area. So I'll just run through these as they are on the slide. So you've got the connection on the left-hand side. You've got a connection with Great Waltham. That comes via the city centre to Great Waltham cycle route, which is a strategic project being brought forward by Essex County Council under the City Growth Package. That tracks along Woodhouse Lane, and then to the south there you've got the connection with the city centre via Broomfield along that route also. Also to the north you've got the connection with Little Waltham. Now that comes as a route along the existing Blasford Hill corridor, and that's going to need some improvements along that corridor, which we've already started to explore, and they'll be agreed by the 106 agreement. And then you've got cross valley routes also coming into the equation here, with the northeast allocations bringing new routes across the valley, which we're going to want to connect with. Now this only shows the, if you like, more the cycle. This is focusing on the cycle routing. There's also pedestrian public rights of way that knit through the site. They run through the centre of the site and they continue out and connect all the surrounding settlements. So we've got here a central neighbourhood centre with co-located early years and childcare provision, and this provides a development with a community focus. And several public open spaces have been identified, and they're spread across the site so that all development parcels have ready access to them. And of course, all those facilities are accessible to residents from outside the site as well. So if you put all these things together, you end up with a structure that looks like this. And as you'll see, that relates directly to the master plan as proposed. So I just want to go through some of the key topics of conversation that have come up during the course of conversation. So starting with sustainable design and construction, Bloor Homes has confirmed its commitment to work with the emerging Making Places SPD in this regard. The master plan can accommodate energy efficient and sustainable design and construction measures. Roads, of course, are a necessity, but streets can be designed to promote people movement. We'll continue working on this as part of the detailed design stages. looking at new community infrastructure, so schools and doctor surgeries being the sort of the key topics that have come up. So the Education Authority has confirmed that only an early years and childcare facility is needed on site. The wider catchment strategy provides coverage for other stages of education, and there will be contributions towards education sought from the development. In terms of local healthcare, new residents will be directed towards existing surgeries. However, in consultation with the NHS, there is fresh consideration being given to increasing service capacity in this area, including the possibility of new GP capacity being created on site or in the locality to meet patient demand. Now, this is obviously a decision of the NHS, but it's something that we've asked them to take another look at, and they'll come back and have a chat with us. Now, if the NHS does decide that a new healthcare facility is needed on site, the master plan does have sufficient flexibility to accommodate that, and that will be part of the neighbourhood centre then. All infrastructure, of course, is to be secured by 106 agreement, and that's done at the outline application stage, not at this stage, not master planning stage. So delivery of the new road into the hospital. So the master plan shows how this new access road into the hospital fits with the development. As I've said earlier, the use of the access has been agreed with the Med Essex Hospital Trust during the local plan examination. So the route will be used for staff, operational traffic, ambulances and buses. Issues with the hospital layout and rat running would prevent wider use, such as visitor use of this route. There is a clearly stated intention to deliver this route as proposed as early as possible in the construction programme, subject to technical considerations which we'll be looking at as part of the outline application. And it is the responsibility of Bloor Homes as a developer to deliver this route under the requirements of the policy. That's the whole route in the hospital road network. Looking at the route through Puddings Wood and the impact that. Now, we have explored various alternatives to the route, even needing to go through Puddings Wood in the first place, but those alternative routes have been ruled out because of their impacts, leaving us with the selected route as the only feasible approach into the hospital grounds. The route follows a natural clearing in the woodland where impact can be minimised, with few exceptions. The route only impacts latter trees, meaning we're high.
Some of the points that you raised, Mr. Jackson, and that are raised by the Little Waltham Parish Council. So I'm delighted to welcome Councillor Robertson, the chair of Little Waltham Parish Council, whose submission we have seen. So delighted to see you, Edith, and please come on stream and share with us your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much for inviting me once again to your meeting. As you've said, thank you very much. I'm the chair of Little Waltham Parish Council. You've also mentioned that my colleague, Councillor Blake of Broomfield, had hoped to be here and to speak, but I don't think he's managed it. But he wanted me to say that very much Broomfield Parish Council, Little Waltham Parish Council are item on this matter, and you will have seen that in my submission document on the areas of the memorandum that we have both signed of the common ground that we have on this particular topic. It's no secret that Little Waltham Parish Council has been against this site being included in the local plan when it was first mooted. However, we understand that life has moved on and that this is now included in the local plan. And as such, we have sought to engage in the master planning process in a constructive way. In fact, we've attended numerous meetings, some just with Broomfield Parish Council, some with Bloor Homes, and most recently, some with the planning officers at Chelmsford. Every time we've met, the issue of the road has been raised. And our concerns, our very grave concerns about the road and what's planned for it, have been mentioned and discussed. I was therefore very surprised to read in your summary document that there is no mention of our concerns about the road and the limitations that are being put on the road. We have been very careful to note that every time we've been asked for a consultation document and every time we've met. The new road is paramount to the development. I talked earlier about we've accepted this development. One of the ways we've accepted it is we get a relief road, which is badly needed into the hospital and to relieve hospital approach. And the price for that in the local community is 400 houses, which we don't particularly want, but we can see the commercial reality of things. So we're not blind to that. And we think, well, maybe that's the trade-off we just have to have, and that's it. However, Mr. Jordan's incorrect when he says this principle of limiting the access to the hospital was agreed at the planning inquiry, or the examination public rather. It wasn't agreed, it was presented as a fait accompli. We were never consulted about it, and neither was Broomfield or any of the residents. It was just presented live at one of the afternoons of the hearings that we attended. So the principle might have been agreed, but it was agreed with the City Council. In fact, it was agreed with City Council planners, not the democratically elected members of the City Council, and the hospital. And we don't think that's open, and we don't think that's transparent. And frankly, Mr. Chairman, we don't think that's very fair. This is a fundamental part of this site. We're not talking about detail here. We're talking about high-level strategy as far as this point is concerned. And we feel we haven't seen any evidence about why it should only be for hospital staff and deliveries. Apart from that's obviously what the hospital want. We haven't seen any mitigation on the traffic issues with that factored in. And we haven't seen the comparison where if that road was open for all visitors to the hospital, what would happen to the traffic in Blasford Hill and hospital approach. So we don't think that due diligence has either been properly done or that due diligence has been shared with the democratically elected representatives of the community that's about to have all these houses put down. So we're not very happy about that, and we'd ask that your committee look very closely at that. We don't think it's correct that the hospital should get their way in this regard. The hospital has a very poor record, as you know, Mr. Chairman, and actually my colleague, Councillor Blake, could talk more about this because he's been more involved in it than I have. But the hospital has a very poor record of being what I would term a good neighbour or fulfilling its obligations, in fact, some legal obligations in terms of Section 106s, which are still outstanding. I understand why the City Council don't want to hold their feet to the fire because doesn't win anybody any votes to be critical of the National Health Service. But it's completely unfair to people who are living near the hospital and in the hospital environment that they don't fulfil their obligations. And for that reason, we've got no faith in the hospital, if it says one thing, actually following through on it. And I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, to say we've got no faith that Chelmsford City Council will actually make them follow through on any agreements that are made with them. So we don't really think that this behaviour and this kind of deal making is very edifying at all. I mean, if this was an out-and-out commercial company, you know, it would be on the front page of the Essex Chronicle. We wouldn't be kowtowing to them, would we? The hospital seems to be running the show or getting what it wants. It's a bit of a tail wagging the dog, I think, whereas we'd be much happier if the democratically elected representatives of the community were involved in this. So, Mr. Chairman, we think that, as I mentioned in my submission, this is a substantial matter of public policy. And as such, it must be dealt with at the very highest level. And I'm sorry to say it can't be left to Mid-Essex Health Trust, the City Council planners to deal with. It has to be dealt with the people who are accountable to the residents of that area. And that, Mr. Chairman, are the democratically elected representatives. And we are asking your group, your policy board, to put a stop to this and actually make sure that we get a road that's fit for everyone who wants to visit the hospital. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for indulging me. Thank you very much for inviting me back, and I look forward to hearing the rest of the feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Robertson. I'm sure you'll hear some of those aspects being touched on in similar fashion, or perhaps from a slightly different point of view as the debate unfolds. I understand that Councillor Blake from Broomfield has now joined us, and with your permission, board members, I will offer him the opportunity to say a few words, as he was unable to attend last week, but now can attend at this reconvened meeting. Does anyone on the board have any objection to that? It is a slight alteration of normal practice, as he's not submitted a written statement. Thank you for that. So I welcome Councillor Blake and offer you the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to just check if you can hear me, first of all. Can you?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, we could. I can't now, though.
Yes. Thank you very much for letting me speak. I'm sorry I wasn't able to attend last week, which I would have done, and I'm speaking a little bit impromptu because I only got in from work about half an hour ago and found your email to say that I could speak. So thank you very much, Chairman and members. I'll try not to dwell, go over the same ground as Edith has put so very well on behalf of both our parishes. One thing I might add, and it is a detail but potentially important one, that the hospital still has outstanding work that it has been legally obliged to do to the roundabout of Hospital Approach and Main Road, the existing roundabout. And we've suggested that since that work hasn't been done for 15 years or so, even though it's legally obliged to, now might be the opportunity to review the whole thing and see if we can't come up with a win-win situation. If the money that was saved from that alteration could be used perhaps to improve parking in the hospital, on the understanding that then the new route in, which we're talking about today, is then for all forms of traffic, then we think there could be an opportunity for the hospital to win. But as Edith has said, we really want to get this sorted out now. If we just leave it for at some point the hospital to change its mind, then we fear that, as Edith has said, nothing will happen. So it really is important to try and get this thing sorted, and for the measures that are in the local plan about the reduction of traffic on Main Road to be achieved, which is what the local residents want. I won't say more. Well, I will say one more thing about the road, if I may, Chairman, and that is that we have grave fears that if there's a barrier, which presumably there would have to be, it's going to cause traffic to back down right through the estate, the new estate, and we just can't see how that works in practice. If I may quickly move on, Chairman, to our other point, which we've made in some detail in our representations to the master plan consultation. We feel that the screening of the new estate from the west is insufficient. It looks like a sort of hedge on the plans, and we feel that it needs to be a very, very dense piece of woodland. Some of our residents, quite a few of our Broomfield residents, live up sort of in Woodhouse Lane, and it's very important for them that as they from their houses, that it would be wonderful if they could see a forest rather than a housing estate. And the other thing is that the landscape of the land to the west of Broomfield, the Pleshy Farmland Plateau, to give it its landscape designation, is really sensitive. It is incredible how tranquil it is, how quiet it is, and I really would invite members to come and have a look. We're giving away free copies of our footpath book at the moment, and our pubs are open now, so you could come and experience it for yourself. But it's really important that this sensitive landscape to the west of Broomfield is protected from the impact of noise, light, etc., and protected visually, because the views is so important. It's not just our own feeling. We've had a professional landscape appraisal done for our neighbourhood plan, and so that can be seen on our website, and it puts in professional terms what I'm trying to rather inadequately describe at the moment. But it really is important that that western boundary is a robust one with a thick a belt of trees that clearly demarcates the new housing development from the unspoiled and very tranquil landscape to the west. I think that's all I need to say, Chairman. Thank you very much indeed for letting me speak.
Thank you very much.
I will wrap up now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and I'm glad that you were able to join us, and thank you to fellow members for permitting that intervention from Broomfield. So my next order of business would be to invite local members to put a particularly local perspective on what they see, how they see this master plan has unfolded. But as I was saying earlier on, and I think this is still true because I now see that Councillor Steele is substituting for Councillor Gulliver, that all three local councillors for this ward are actually on the board. So I don't know whether one of you wishes to speak now, or whether you'd all wish to reserve your comments when the board debates things.
Well, Council Chairman, I put an H in the. If I may say a few words, if that's okay. So, oh, sorry, I interrupted Councillor Dayton. So you choose
did.
who goes
We were
first.
at the same meeting, so go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, what if she permits me? What I will say is that both Councillor Dayton and myself and Councillor Davidson were actually at a meeting with the hospital trust today, and they told us, in terms of the Spine Road, they told us something quite surprising. They told us that the 70% of the traffic that goes to the hospital is actually staff cars, staff traffic. And I would wish to ask Neil Jordan, has he done traffic analysis in that respect as to whether if the hospital are just thinking about using the Spine Road for staff cars only, has there a traffic analysis been done to see what percentage of traffic that goes to the hospital that would take? Because I kind of thought it would be the other way around, actually, that most of the traffic will be visitors and patients, but we were told something different at a hospital trust board today. The other comment I would make in terms of Woodhouse Lane is that I understand and sympathise with Mr. Jackson's view on the blockages that would occur down there. But if something was to be done that stopped, that removed those blockages, I would say also that we need to seriously think about how we would stop rat running through the site, and would ask that somehow that's taken into consideration and we don't end up with rat running down Woodhouse Lane. But the first question was really to Neil Jordan as to, could he tell us what traffic analysis has been done that suggests how much traffic would go down the Spine Road if it was purely for staff? And perhaps Councillor Dayton would now like to comment if there's anything else that came out of that meeting.
Thank you for that, Councillor Steele. If there's something additional, that I see Councillor Knight has also got his hand up, so I don't know whether he and Councillor Dayton wish to say their piece now or hold their further interventions for the debate on the board.
I would like to say something. Can I be heard, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, you can.
Would Wendy like to go before me, or shall I?
I can do. Mine is relating to the meeting today. I mean, the hospital, they have got a planned parking scheme that they've bid for that will create 400 new places, and in that design they have incorporated a access from the Blorholm site, which they're exceptionally supportive of the Spine Road and delivering that, and they want it to happen in phase 1. So you know, in view of that clarity, I don't know if we can impose that tonight, that we actually encourage that it happens in phase 1.
Okay, I'm sure we'll debate that, and the officer reaction we'll hear in a minute. Councillor Knight.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Heritage is extremely important. I think we could all agree with that. And over the years, I think Chelmsford has lost many of its outlying villages that have been subsumed into ribbon development. And I can't add anything more than the chair of Little Waltham Parish Council and the chair of the planning committee at Broomfield have made their points very, very strongly and very, very eloquently. I can't add anything more than that, other than to ask the chair and the board to take them into high consideration, because these villages are important and they deserve to be preserved as far as possible. The hospital is important, but so are the local people as well. And my thoughts are also with Woodhouse Lane, that has to be treated very, very fairly in this instance. That's the end of my piece, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, councillors. I appreciate that. I'm going to come back to the officers in a minute to reply to some of those points, and thank you for that new information, which was new to me as well. I'm aware that Councillor Davidson, who is here and had come along, also aware that this was the discussion item and would be discussed. I don't know whether Councillor Davidson, you wish to add anything on the content of that meeting this morning?
No, I think the other two parish councillors have already covered most of that. As they said, Broomfield Hospital is working on improving the parking, because that was the main agenda item today, because it affects so many of our residents, and it's the thing we have most queries about. What the Hospital Trust did say was that their plans for a possible one-way system around the hospital and the extra parking they're doing is all based around where that new road would come out. So I don't know how that's going to work, whether it is just ambulances and staff and service vehicles that will use that. I don't know how that all fits together exactly. I did want to ask a question actually of Mr. Jordan about the cycle route, the Cross Valley one. What's the timing on that? Was there a bit more detail about that, please?
Thank you for that, Councillor Davidson, and it does put a slightly more encouraging perspective on the relationship between the hospital and the enthusiasm for the hospital to engage in discussions and negotiations than perhaps we had previously perceived. But I'm going to hand back to Keith, to Neil Jordan, if I may, to respond to some of the points that have been raised so far.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, I'm going to deal with the matters in a fairly chronological order, if I can. So that will start with Woodhouse Lane. So if you just bear with me, I'm just going to share my screen again. And hopefully you can see that. So so this plan is taken from the master plan document, and it shows essentially how rat running between the new hospital access and the wider network to the south can be avoided. You'll see I've also dropped an inset here just to show better how the roads connect through. So this is North Court Road. It does continue for a little way, so there's a bit of extra road in between here, but eventually it finds its way to Hospital Approach, and that continues across to the roundabout with Main Road, Broomfield. So just to start with, I just want to take a step back and just remind us all about our vision here. And in that we're stating that we want to focus on high quality placemaking, and we want to make attractive routes for walking and cycling, i.e. we want to focus on sustainable movement. And that's embedded within the local plan policy, and it's a fundamental part of them. To be less and more suitable for people walking or cycling. Of course, we also need to take into account how people access their properties, of course. We also know here that we've got 450 new homes to the north, and that there is a requirement for a road connection through the development into the hospital. And that road creates a physical connection at this point with Woodhouse Lane, providing the ability for people to rat run via those lanes unless we control it. Now, if we don't address the potential for rat running, that could allow traffic to continue building up along Hospital Approach and Blastford Hill, which basically undermines the purpose of the new access road in its totality. It'll also make Woodhouse Lane environment particularly unattractive for walking and cycling, so it really conflicts with what we're trying to achieve. We also know that the junction with Woodhouse Lane on Blasford Hill is unsatisfactory. It has poor visibility and not particularly comfortable to use. So we don't want to see an intensified use of that junction in any outcome here. And that's part of the policy expectation as well. So you see from these proposals that this first section here just provides access through from that junction to this handful of properties here with the blue arrows. So you've got Woodhouse, Woodhouse Lodge, this site currently, but that access will be removed as part of its approval. It does have approval, but it's subject to a current application at the moment. So no access beyond this tight bend, if you like, although the road physically remains in place. You just can't get a vehicle. You won't be able to get a vehicle through there, and then you've got the turning head there. The next segment here is from North Court Road. It serves this little parcel here, and that includes Farley Hospice. Again, no through access in either direction. It's purely that part there, but the road physically remains for foot and cycle movement, but served by a turning head here and also here as well. Then looking at the access, the hospital access road. So as soon as the route enters the private estate here, as there's been a bit of discussion on, that will be controlled, and it's got to be a physical means of control to prevent people getting through there and prevent rat running through the hospital site itself. And then all movement from the western end of Woodhouse Lane is directed then onto the Spine Road and onto Blasford Hill via the new site access. Blasford Hill is going to receive the benefit of fewer movements and less queuing because we've taken a lot of vehicles associated with the hospital off of that route and directed them down towards the hospital via the new access road. So there's a kind of a quid pro quo in terms of, yes, vehicles from the western end of Woodhouse Lane will need to go a short way north to go south, but the journey time is not going to increase because you have less traffic on the route. So there is a balance here. Now, what this proposal as a whole achieves is access into the hospital, which is obviously the critical outcome. Whilst I appreciate the comments made, the proposal does provide equitable access to the properties all the way along Woodhouse Lane. Absolutely key to this is to this proposal is that the proposal prevents rat running. And of course, in doing that, the result here is a much better environment for walking and cycling all the way along Woodhouse Lane. And we have met with residents along Woodhouse Lane, both at the time of the public consultation and subsequent, and we have considered the alternative suggestions that have been tabled. But ultimately, if the proposals don't offer sufficient control of rat running, and they don't offer sufficient management of access into the hospital site, then they're not going to achieve the necessary outcomes. And that is the conclusion that we've reached with those alternative proposals. Comments relating to antisocial behaviour or criminal activity occurring in the turning heads is noted. However, the access roads are somewhat self-governing. There are a limited number of people who are going to be using those for access because of the nature of how they're being closed off, and the new development offers surveillance, natural surveillance from those properties that are going to be surrounding the road. And the road itself will feel like it's part of the community. It's not an isolated dead end road in the middle of nowhere. It's embedded within a community area. So we don't think that CCTV really is something that we feel is going to be needed in those turning heads. So I don't think those more detailed comments that Mr. Jackson raised on the CCTV monitoring of things should come into play, because I don't think it's a route that we need to go down. If I can then look at who can use the hospital access. So yeah, I get it. So what I just want to do here is just explain why the use of the road is what it is in this proposal. So here's a slide of the hospital site. You'll see, in fact, I'm just going to try this on. It's slightly easy to see. So you've got the access in from the north, as is proposed. Currently, you come in via hospital approach, and as you come in currently, you come to the roundabout junction, and then you go north. If you're staff, you get into the staff car parking areas, or you go south if you're a visitor into the visitor parking areas. It's very much a north-south divide. Also here you've got the bus terminus, and the accident and emergency is here. Now, if we were to introduce visitor parking via this access to the north as being suggested, what that would mean is putting visitors into a staff parking environment, first of all. Now, there's lots of parking there, of course, but it's not for visitors. And bear in mind, we're talking about people coming to the hospital site for maybe the first time or infrequently, more than likely have other things on their mind. They're going to be confused as to where they're supposed to be going. And so they're going to slow down, and they're going to slow traffic down behind them, and they're going to create an obstruction within that part of the network, which is going to be a problem. And then when visitors do get down to this part of the network, to the roundabout junction, they will actually have priority over anyone coming in from hospital approach direction because of the arm they're coming in on. So what that will do is slow down traffic coming along hospital approach up to that junction, which will quickly knock on to other parts of the network and actually starts to undermine all the good work that you've done by putting this new route in. So added to that is the fact that you can also, you'd have no way of controlling with this route here, you'd have no way of controlling rat running into the hospital because you've opened that. If you've opened that access up to let visitors through, it means you've basically taken out the means of control that you'd have there. So you'd have any vehicle then able to come through here and then pop out onto that road, or vice versa. So I can understand why it seems counterintuitive to limit the role of the access road. It did to me to start with, to be fair. But for those reasons I've quickly summed up, it does mean that we undermine the benefits of putting the new access routes into the hospital because we're introducing or reintroducing cars back onto the congested parts of the network. What the law proposal achieves is to address the staff movements of one of Essex's largest employment bases. It will realise significant improvement on this part of the network. And just throwing a couple of stats which have already been mentioned, the 70% of all movement along hospital approach are staff, and 60% of all the staff arrive from the north. So we're taking a considerable percentage of car movements off the worst part of the network by the proposals that we've got in front of us, without the visitor parking, visitor access being added in there. Now, the hospital are, of course, as we've heard, are looking at their own site, and we expect they will produce their own master plan in due course, which will deal with, amongst other topics, the parking and circulation issues. If, of course, there are reasons in the future to adapt the approach, say if the hospital changes the location of staff or visitor parking, for example, and can address the rat running issue, then it will be within the gift of the hospital, working with the local community, local authorities, etc. at that time, to reconsider the function of the access road. I would point out that the road design we're working with currently would allow for wider use as appropriate in the future, but what I must stress here is that we cannot hold the development of the allocation site in abeyance while the hospital does their own master planning, since we don't know how long that will take, or the duration of construction works which will be involved in changing the hospital site. And for the reasons stated, the access absolutely cannot be opened up to wider use at this time. So just coming on to some of the other comments that have been made, I think hopefully I've picked up their responses essentially to Mr. Jackson and Edith Robertson of the Little Waltham Parish Council. Councillor John Blake mentioned the barrier. Well, the barrier is necessary, as you've heard, and it has to be a physical means of control. And obviously that's going to be assessed as part of the more detailed assessment that comes forward with the next phases of the planning process. And there's different ways that you can control it within that philosophy of control. So there'll be some tweaking here and there that can be done to make sure that we're checking to make sure that queue lengths aren't too much, they're not excessive, and that people are moving through that means of control quite efficiently. So that's something that will certainly be looked at, but is not something that, from a master planning perspective, we just don't have enough information at this time to judge what the appropriate control is, beyond knowing it has to be physical. Screening from the west, we have taken that into account. I mean, we're talking about the western belt, which if I so we're talking about this belt, and obviously the north. It's the Pleshy Farmland Plateau comes northwest, and there's an undulation to the topography, and the site is basically sloping away, generally speaking, from that direction. So we've got a planting belt here, landscape belt, in the order of, it's around 40 metres, give or take. Now, I appreciate that the illustrative greening here is, it looks like there's an awful lot of open space there relative to actual planted landscaping. Now, this isn't a detailed planting scheme by any stretch of the imagination, and we will be going through that detailed process of consideration, and we'll be expecting to know exactly how the compensation for the woodland route and all the other development within this site results in the net biodiversity gain which the development has to achieve. So I'm pretty sure that we're going to end up with something on that western boundary which is entirely fit for purpose, and gives us the characteristics of woodland, more woodland characteristics than not. But what I can't say is the exact specifics. We don't prescribe that at this stage, and all we're really doing is saying that is a green zone, not a zone for development. And beyond that, we'll keep working on that philosophy going forward and achieve that woodland character, which I think is in everyone's mindset. So that's hopefully dealt with that. Councillor Still asked about in fact, some of the figures that I've then requoted. So a lot of the evidence is coming from either the local plan, so it's evidence that's already been sort of verified, if you like, through the examination in public, or it's come from the hospital themselves, or it's come from work that the Essex County Council has done, or it's work that Blore Homes are doing. So we don't have any one source of evidence at the moment, and obviously there's an awful lot more to be done. So as we go further into this, the level of evidence increases, and we start to get to what we'll have is a transport assessment submitted with the outline application, and that transport assessment will give us all of the information, all of the tested facts and figures, all the stats that we can actually rely upon. So at the moment, the information that we've got is top level. It's basically from the hospital themselves, or it's from the local plan, and the hospital are doing their own assessments as part of their master planning. So they're doing staff surveys and things like that, which will give us a much better picture of what we're working with. So we don't have anything that in addition that we can present at this time. Councillor Dayton mentioned phase 1 delivery, which I think we all want that. We all want early delivery of this route. I don't think anyone's going to turn around and say they don't want that. Blore has in their master plan has committed to deliver the route early, but subject to technical considerations, and that's fair, because what we don't know is everything at this stage. So what we need to bear in mind is that at the outline stage, when we're working up a section 106, the legal agreement that provides all of the obligations that the development has to abide by as it's built out, and that will set all the timetable for these various pieces of infrastructure. At that time, we'll be going through all of the ins and outs. We'll know the transport assessment and all of the loading on the local network and where it reaches critical points and things, and we'll work that into the timetable, so that we're evidence based in terms of the way that we approach the timetabling. So I don't think there's no question that everyone is working to deliver this early. And phase 1, starting point probably is first day of construction from the council's perspective. However, we have to be mindful of all of those technical factors that come into this, and they will push that delivery back to a sensible point in the programme, and that will be the point at which we have to accept that that's the earliest it can be brought forward. So we can't say more than that at this stage. Really, all I can really say is that it's something that we'll confirm as part of the outline application, but that we'll work towards early delivery as much as possible. Councillor Knight mentioned the assessment patterns. We have worked with that, so you'll see from the where I'm waving my my laser pointer here, that this feathering out of the assessment. So you've got this ribbon of development coming up Brasford Hill, feathering this out, giving way to greening here, and this is a sort of this is part of the village, but it's not part of the main village assessment here. That's actually the village assessment starts further north. It gives you that as clear a separation as you're going to be able to achieve with this and maintain the allocation of sort of 450 homes. So we have to be sensible about what areas of green we're keeping. There is a balance here, but we've achieved, I think, is what is a good separation between those two assessments. And I think that retains the key characteristics of what you perceive of the village assessments on the ground. Appreciating that actually on this everything on this side is actually Little Waltham, but as you perceive it on the ground, that's how you perceive the village assessments. And Councillor Davidson asked about the timing of the Cross Valley route. That is the Cross Valley routes are being delivered through the North East allocations. And the North East allocations are, as we all know, huge. They're the New Garden Villages, part of the Greater Bewley area. And that's infrastructure that's being delivered by those parcels. So I don't have a timetable on those as yet. But what we are doing with these proposals in northwest Chelmsford, with this site, is we're looking at how that future routing can take place, so that we don't miss the opportunity to make that connection happen. So that's why we're looking at it at this stage, and we're getting a rough idea of where those routes are going to be coming in. So work's already started to be done on that with the Essex County Council officers. Thank you.
Thank you very much again. I'm going to come back to the members of the board to debate these and other items, other aspects of the plan in a minute. Just a couple of quick things. I need to respond to Mr. Jackson, who has asked whether he has, in some sense, the right of reply, which I'm sorry to say that our procedures don't allow. I suspect he may hear more of the debate about the percentages that we've been learning about just now and about the extent of the highways analysis that has already been done and will be developed further over time between now and the planning applications. And I'm sure that officers will be more than willing to share those in more detail to the parish councils and to local members if they feel that those have not been adequately, they've not been made adequately aware of those things. Secondly, I'm going to ask whether there is a member of the Essex County Council Highways Department here who wants to add anything on those aspects of the debate. And I also see that Mr. Potter from our Senior Planning Officer is here with his hand up. So let me first go to Mr. Potter.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think possibly I was going to kind of do a bit of a summing up, but I think it's probably a good time just to pick up some of the issues about the local plan that was discussed from, I think, Councillor Robertson and I think Councillor Steele in terms of modelling. So the local plan had a strategic highways model that looked at a new link, a new road link that went into the hospital being a significant destination for traffic, as we all know. That was modelled at that high level, as you would expect in terms of the principles of allocating a development site. And then Councillor Steele was talking about whether we know the splits of who are actually in the cars in relation to the amount of visitor traffic compared to people that are working in the hospital. And that would be very much the role of a transport assessment that would drill into that detail in relation to a future planning application. Because as members were aware, master plans are pretty high level. They're strategic. They're that stepping stone between the local plan and the planning application. Now, we wouldn't necessarily know that data, and we will be sourcing that data from places like, obviously, the employers, the destinations. So we would be sourcing data from them. And as Mr. Jordan was saying, we were aware that about 60% of the workers in the hospital come from the north. But as we say, the hospital's got further data showing that about 70% of the car usage on hospital approach is actually from workers or related rather than visitors. So I think we just need to be mindful at this point in time. We're looking at a master plan and not a planning application where all of that detail comes to the fore. I think the other thing that I just wanted to reiterate is when you look at that master plan, and I don't know whether Mr. Jordan could just pop that back up on the screen again for us, so we can say thank you very much, Neil. I mean, what you can see there, members, is a significant landscape-led development. There are some really deep buffers there of landscape. There's a really good spine, a linear spine going through that, which is actually the boundary of an old boundary between Waltham and the Broomfield parish, with a really good hedge and a highway, an existing public right of way through there. So you've got a really good landscape-led approach. You've got the meadowland to the south, providing buffering to the listed buildings that are on Blasford Hill. You've got a neighbourhood centre right in the middle, rather than being on the edge where you see some of them where you attract that kind of, where sometimes they're attracting that kind of passing traffic. You're seeing something right in the middle, so you're reducing the need to travel. You're encouraging people to be cycling and walking. You've got something that really fits into the existing cycle and footway proposals and network. So I think what we can see is a proposal that has really evolved over a period of years, but really evolved into something where we feel that it's a landscape-led, sustainable transport approach that is before you tonight, members. I think that's all I want to say at the moment. Thank you very much, Chair. But I thought it's just good to give that bit of a summary. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I don't know whether the county council officer wants to say anything, or should we move straight to the board?
Hello, it's Emma Featherstone here, who's Essex Highways officer.
Thank you for being here.
I think Neil, Jordan and Jeremy Potter have pretty much stolen my thunder and covered everything I really have to say. I can only reiterate, obviously, there's been local plan modelling at the local plan stage, and there'll be more detailed modelling involved in the transport assessment, which is part of the outline planning application. So I really can't add any more to that at the time being.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for being here and for participating in the debate. So I'd like to move to allow the members of the board to discuss the matters that they've heard and any other aspects of this master plan that they would like to raise. First hand I see, I'm going to take 2 or 3 points together, and ideally they will be around the same sort of subject, and then go back to officers from time to time if we need for further elaboration. First hand up I see is Councillor Roberts. And then I also have Councillor Knight and Councillor Dayden, I think, again, who may or may not want to participate at this stage again. And I also have Councillor Fuller and Councillor Moore and then Councillor Fuller. So Councillor Roberts, first of all, if I may.
Yeah, good evening. Yeah, Mr. A very simple question, really. I listened to the Neil's sort of report giving, and I didn't hear him mention the LiveWell accreditation. And I just wondered whether Bloor Homes have actually signed up for that. So it's just a question to be answered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that'll be picked up again in a few minutes. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. Many thanks, Neil, for that presentation. And it's really heartening, and I'm sure we all welcome a landscape-led approach and such a coherent cycle path and footpath network. My question really is on timescale for mitigating the loss of trees. Obviously, with a large civil engineering project such as a road cutting through Puddingwood is the western boundary. How soon will we see planting schemes in place there. Obviously, it takes time to establish habitat, and I'm just interested to know, in a broad timescale, how that process works on a large development such as this, and do you give consideration to the loss of habitat and make sure that adequate habitat is provided elsewhere in tandem with that? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Hold that thought, officers, please. Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Chair. I just really wanted to clarify what the situation is between this master plan and the hospital master plan. We've heard the expression, it's in the gift of the hospital. So when they do come up with their master plan, which we hope is not too far away, you know, can they change their minds and we can't do anything about it? Or can we insist that one particular strategy is adopted in terms of just employees and ambulance and so on? So, you know, who has the final say on that sort of master plan confusion? And secondly, in terms of the physical barrier, why can't we have something like number plate recognition? Why does it have to be a physical barrier coming into the hospital? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm aware that Councillor Walsh also has a hand up, but let's not lose the point so far. Let me go back to the officers and then come to Councillor Walsh immediately after that.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so Councillor Roberts asked about LiveWell accreditation. Yeah, I can confirm that the developer has committed in the master plan to sign up to that accreditation. It's a matter of when do you actually sign up to the accreditation, but they're fully read up on the Essex initiative, the LiveWell initiative, and they have committed to follow that up with their development, so they are committed to it. Councillor Moore asked about timescales. So each site will be a little bit different. Generally speaking, we recognise that it's around 5 years to establish a decent amount of vegetation, such that it's actually making a sort of contribution to the landscape or to habitat, etc. So we know that there is a time lag between when you plant something and how, you know, it being able to grow to a functional stage in its development. So what we will, I mean, it's something that in terms of timetables, they're always something that we negotiate at the Section 106 stage. So when we're making when we come to a decision making stage with the outline application, and the outline application is what essentially governs the rest of the process. So everything keeps coming back to that outline, the outline decision, whether it's a condition on that decision, whether it's the content of the application, or whether it's one of the obligations in a legal agreement. That's the stage at which we'll confirm what all of those timetables and sequencing are. What I will say is that point is taken. That ultimately, if we're looking at having an acceptable, balanced outcome with this development, we have to give consideration to what time do you start providing that mitigation so that it actually has the desired effect when you come to have the impact. So ideally you want to see some gain before pain, but you know, obviously we're gonna take a balanced approach to this. But the point is taken. Unfortunately, I can't answer the question directly, but the point is taken, and it's something that we'll carry on looking at into the next stages of the process. Councillor Fuller asked about the strategies, the varying strategies. So obviously, we're talking here about the master plan for an allocation site, the 450 homes, and that's reached a point of agreement with the various stakeholders in terms of the landowner, the local planning authority, or officers, I should say, and highway officers, to deliver a form of access that we all consider will work and bring the desired benefits. Now, what I was speaking about is really, I suppose it's more of an olive branch to those that say they don't agree with the strategy that we're taking at this moment in time, and they feel that you could have a better outcome if you just opened up to visitors and the like. So really what I was saying there is that if the master plan, the hospital master plan, which is it's a separate master plan, it's not related to this master plan directly. It's a separate body that's bringing that forward, and they're working on that. And they don't have to come through this process per se, because it's not a growth site. So they may decide that it's the master plan that they work to, might be a master plan they do put through some sort of a formal planning process, an outline application or something. But it's they have ownership. The hospital has ownership of their master plan. If they are able to deal with rat running, if they are able to deal with the configuration logistics of what parking goes where, then it may be, what I'm saying is it may be possible for that access to be revisited at that time, and the master plan that the hospital is bringing forward hopefully will present the case for doing that, if that's the approach to be taken. However, as things stand, and I need to be absolutely clear on this, as things stand, the approach that we've come to the conclusion should be taken is that this route is to be for staff, operational traffic of the hospital, blue light run occasionally, although the main blue light run will continue to be down hospital approach, and for buses if the bus service can be brought through and into the hospital site. So that is what we're asking for consideration of tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just noticed that Councillor Davidson has put in the chat area that the hospital is talking in terms of installing number plate recognition hardware and software inside the hospital. So presumably, those systems will have the opportunity to talk to each other as the hospital and Bloor are planning how to make this work. So that would be helpful, I think. I have Councillor Walsh, and I also have Councillor Knight, who I think may have had his hand up a little while ago. I'm sorry, now wishes to come back in as a member of the board. So Councillor Walsh first and Councillor Knight, please. I think you're still muted, Councillor.
Sorry, Chair, was that for me?
Yes, indeed, Councillor Walsh.
Okay, sorry, yeah, my connection just seems to, when I turned on the camera, so I'm just going to leave it off. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation, Mr. Jordan. Just looking at the development from the perspective of the Movement Around the City working group, I'd welcome the focus on promoting sustainable travel opportunities within this development, for this development. And it's positive to see that consideration has been given to the wider existing cycle network in Chelmsford. I guess one question is that is there any way that with the pedestrian and cycle access connecting to Broomfield Hospital, could that reduce the car use to the hospital, and how could that be promoted from the development? Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Steele.
Coming off mute, I hope. Thank you. So I would just wanted to, I was pleased to hear the confirmation from Neil Jordan that the 70% figure coming from staff usage, and you said 60% arrive from the north. So you multiply those two together, you get 42% basically using the spine road. And I will pick up Mr. Jackson's point, which I think he wanted to make, was I guess there is then a concern that that's nearly half the traffic going down the spine road, and the spine road could potentially have a barrier at the end of it. I think we just need to take into consideration that that may cause a backlog of traffic, and but I think Neil's kind of addressed some of that. So, but I'd just like it to be noted that Mr. Jackson has raised the point that effectively 42% of the traffic is coming in by the spine road, and the spine road has a barrier at the end, or even if it's an AMPR system, there's potentially a queue forming down there, and we need to take note of that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think if I may just intervene a little bit myself on those sorts of the points, following on from what Councillor Walsh is saying, I mean, the whole question of how we resolve some of the transportation issues that are arising without any further development, but just as they are at the moment, is very much part of the focus of the movement around the city working group, in particular around parking regulations and the park and ride site and so on and so forth, which is interrelated with this, and is a long-term move that we, the council, are looking very seriously to promote and help enable of modal shift. And so, although one's not in a position to legislate for that, one does need to look at our development plans and our master plans to see that they are in line with that longer term aim, and which I believe they are, and have the flexibility which Mr. Jordan touched on to modify over time if that proves to be necessary. And the other thing I would say, which of course harks back to my time as a Broomfield councillor and way before that, is that the movement around the city is also going to be looking very seriously, has already started to look very seriously, as Mr. Potter knows, at the B1008 itself, and to see what measures are appropriate in the context of all of the development which is going on at this site and to the northeast, and so on and so forth, because there is no doubt that the existing level of traffic on the B1008 continues to pose considerable problems. Modal shift will help. Cycleways being better for up and down into Chelmsford, and bus routes being more heavily used, virus permitting, will be helpful. So one has to take these particular plans for this particular site with a degree of confidence that we're looking also at ways in which other aspects of the B1008 can be improved. So we're going to find this as a policy board again and again, that the interrelationship of specific master plan sites, however large they are, with the wider strategy that we want to put in place for modal shift, is going to be an important aspect. So I have Councillor Poulter, please.
Thank you, Chairman. My concern also relates to transportation. I'm encouraged by what Neil Jordan says about the possibility that this isn't necessarily forever, and the hospital may reconsider the visitor staff relationship with regard to the northern access route. My specific question relates to the park and ride. Will that be from the existing roundabout, or will it be from the more convenient northern roundabout? Thank you.
Let's take that specific question, if we may, officers.
That last question, I have to be honest, I don't know the answer to. I don't know if my colleague from the county council, Emma, can answer that. Maybe she can't.
Do you want me to butt in?
Thank you.
Well, I can't necessarily answer it. I would imagine it would be from the existing roundabout, because of purely where it drops off to the hospital for visitors within the bus turning area. But I mean that level of detail can be considered within the within the outline planning application, I would have thought.
I know. I see Councillor. I see Mr. Potter did have his hand up as well, but I think part of the answer is that, of course, that's not in this council's gift, and there are very active conversations going on the movement around the city working group and between our councillors and the county council about the future of park and ride and this particular site and the route to the hospital in itself. But I don't think we're yet in a position to confirm detail of that. And the other thing that reminds me of, that earlier on in the conversation, there was the question from Councillor Blake from Broomfield about the improvements that have been slated for some time on the existing roundabout at Hospital Approach. And I guess this fits in with the fact that it's been referred to of the need for further studies to be drilling down into the detail as this master plan progresses, to enable decisions like that to be finally confirmed one way or the other as to which roundabout we're talking about for park and ride. Mr. Potter?
Well, I'll leave that one to Mr. Jordan, because I do know that work has continued. I just wanted to pick up on the park and ride point before we move on to that one, if you would, Chair. I mean, I think this gives the opportunity for the park and ride shuttle to use the northern access. It will be a bus route. it probably will be a better route coming in from the north, because that's the way the bus comes round from the top. So I think this route provides that flexibility for Councillor Porter's question. Obviously, the detail will follow, but there is the opportunity for that to happen. I'll defer to Mr. Jordan in relation to the round.
Is that okay, Chair, to answer that?
Yes, of course. Sorry, yes, I should have said, please do.
So yeah, sorry, I should have talked about this earlier. So in relation to Councillor Blake's comments about the delays in bringing forward the long delays, I should say, perhaps, in bringing forward the works at Main Road Hospital Approach roundabout. Those works are not only to benefit the hospital, they are to benefit the Hanbury Place development, which is a countryside scheme just to the north of Hospital Approach. And an awful lot of work has gone into Hospital Approach to benefit that already, but there are some geometry improvements that are going to come about as a consequence of those works. They are committed by the 106. So at this stage, we know that they are necessary. We know that they are going to have benefit to the public highway network, and we know that they need to be delivered. And we have been working very hard with the hospital as officers of the City Council and the County Council to bring those works forward. And I'm of the belief that they are coming forward very soon. A tangent to that comment was the thought that maybe you can direct monies back into the hospital. Well, as has been said, the hospital is actually a private finance organisation. It's a private organisation, albeit it's part of the National Health Service, and they are already bidding. They have a means to bid for, if you like, Treasury funding or central government funding, which they can put into this site through the NHS, through NHS England, which they are doing. They've already demonstrated that they're doing that to solve some of their parking issues. So the hospital really should be left to get on with that. And we wish them the best of luck, and we'll be working with them and facilitating those works as best we're able to. But really, let's keep the two issues separate. The roundabout works on Main Road Hospital Approach are needed, and we want them to come forward as soon as they possibly can. Law are going to deliver this new route into the northern side of the hospital site, and the hospital themselves are going to work on their internal circulation and parking issues. And when all those things come to fruition, hopefully we're all going to be very happy with the outcome.
Thank you. I must just apologise if I'm beginning to disappear into darkness. I've discovered that part of my lighting circuit here has fused. So rather than get up and try to get my lights to work, you're going to see me getting darker and darker as the evening progresses. I have Councillor Knight wishing to come back in and Councillor Dayden wishing to come back in. And I wanted also to refer back to one aspect of the previous discussion on Warren Farm in terms of electric versus gas power supplies and other sustainable power supply mechanisms. And I know Councillor Willis had his hand up at one point. So let me take Councillor Knight, Councillor Dayden and then Councillor Willis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to question this 70-30 split between hospital employees and the public. I'm not an expert in hospitals, thankfully, but it would seem to be the hospital works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and the public do not access the hospital 24/7, 365. Therefore, to get a better split of what is actually going on in terms of traffic movement onto the site, we really need to do it hour by hour through the day. For example, if you have a 9 o'clock appointment, presumably all the staff that are going to take care of you for the appointment will have been parked up and ready and waiting for you well before 9 o'clock in the morning. So I think it's been touched on by Mr. Jordan and Mr. Potter as well, but I think it's a point that needs to be made. And if the traffic movements were checked hour by hour through the day, it may very well solve the problems that Mr. Jordan said earlier on, access to the roundabout and backing up on Hospital Approach and so on. That's what I wanted to say, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dayden.
Thank you, Chair. The hospital have a parking strategy and they have a design that incorporates the point of access from Blaw's home site into the hospital, and they were very certain today that they're ready to progress, that access won't interfere with their car park. They have a plan, and I accept that surprises do occur, but ensuring that Relief Road connects to the hospital site before phase 2 commence will give Blore sort of focus. And I just wondered what kind of time frame am I asking, because I feel like I'm asking for at least 18 months, 2 years for them to get that road done before they start on phase 2, which it doesn't feel unreasonable to me. When COVID has all passed, Chelmsford will have increased again in size and the traffic problems will be back. So I feel this is our chance to do the right thing by existing residents. So to be clear, the hospital are very happy for public to use that road, to use the Spine Road. And I feel Great Leys is going to expand in this local plan that hasn't been talked about. It will keep expanding in the future, I'm sure. So many of that traffic will go down Broomfield Road into the city. So that could be quite a valuable access route. So I don't know how difficult that is to change its use once we've actually committed it to being staff only. And if I just quickly go back to Woodhouse Lane residents they are hugely concerned about the inconvenience the closure of the lane will put on them. They will always have to go 3 miles out of their way to enter the city centre. So I feel often the lack of harmony with new developments being accepted is that they just feel ignored at times. So it's a polite plea to Emma and Neil, if we could have just one final get together and bang our heads and just listen to them, because I know Mr. Jackson's living is made out of ANPR, so he understands traffic flow and what he's talking about. And 3 councillors today have listened to how sort of one route in, one route out is good for stopping rat running, so which kind of is supported by the left turn theory that Mr. Jackson put forward. And if we're talking about cycling and sustainable movement, I just wondered, with all the orange dots, are they the cycle routes now for the site? Because I think when this was initially proposed, it had one cycle route on it. And I think if we're asking the public to seriously consider cycling as a mode of transport, it has to be separate routes without the interaction of cars and pedestrians. Pedestrians, I think, are much as a nuisance to cyclists as cyclists are to vehicles, and they both have the threat of accidents. So when you're cycling to work, you just want to go there direct and you want to travel at speed. And when you walk around your community with your dog and your toddler, you don't want to be constantly looking out for bikes and preventing accidents. You know, you want to be bug watching and smelling flowers. So I feel we've got a fantastic opportunity to set a really high standard that we're serious about cycling, and that that has to be separate from every other mode of transport. So I would really hope that as a policy board, we can encourage dedicated routes for cycling that are separate and go forward. I've kind of got on a roll. Sorry, carry on.
Thank you for that. Yes, I mean, let's have one more run around with this particular point about where we go with the detail of the access point and the detail of the traffic that is and isn't allowed through that access point and along the Spine Road. I think we've heard, from my point of view, a very clear message that's come from the planning officers and backed up by the highways officers, that and I had thought was the preference of the hospital as to where this should be, and risked less build up and through traffic through the new site by way of rat running. If you're saying that this morning you heard that the hospital is saying that they would prefer to have staff and visitors going through the new access, then that's entirely new to me, but I'm not sure whether that's the case. But let's go back to Mr. Potter or Mr. Jordan for 1 second on that, and then at the same time just cover the question of separate use of cycle paths and roads and how that safety can be assured. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If you don't mind, if I could just very briefly touch on Councillor Knight's request for more detailed assessment of
Yes.
of access movements and things, in which we are happy to go into as part of the TA. That information, we'll know all about the peak loading, and it will be a much more detailed breakdown. So just to reassure on that point, but that will come in at the TA stage, the transport assessment stage. It comes with the outline. So this issue of public access into the hospital. So what the hospital shared with you today, or whenever it was, is their own thinking on this. It's not been through any form of what I would call due diligence in terms of assessment of the impact that it has off-site. So they're obviously having a look at their site and how they can circulate within their site. And they can probably feasibly get that to work. What they haven't done yet is look at the implications that has on the public highway network. So, as I say, it's about two issues. It's about how people can get in and around the hospital site and making sure that works efficiently. But it's also about making sure that the rat running doesn't occur, and that we can solve that problem. Now, if the hospital and the hospital will bring that to us. We haven't actually been involved in that particular stage of the conversation. They've obviously wanted to talk to the council at a councillor level first. When they come to us, we'll do a full check on what their proposals contain. And if that does start to show that there are some changing status of what we need to, in terms of our position, then we'll adapt. As I said before, we're not going to hold things up on this. This is ultimately, we want the best outcome. We're not trying to be stubborn on saying that this is the only approach that can be taken. What we've done is we've assessed the attributes of that information that we've got to hand, and we've come up with a conclusion which we feel is the best fit for the circumstances. If those circumstances are starting to shift, then obviously we need to have another conversation. That needs to be a conversation with the developer, with the hospital, with the highway authority, with ourselves, and we need to work out if that's reasonable, and if there's any works to facilitate that and things, because there'll be a timetable involved in that as well, and we need to make sure that if we're wanting this delivery to come forward sooner rather than later in terms of the access road, we need to make sure we're not making it virtually impossible for the developer to actually deliver a piece of infrastructure, a known piece of infrastructure, by a date if we keep moving the goalposts. So we have to be a little bit careful about that. But I'll reiterate again, we want to be flexible on this, and we want to make sure that the best outcome is reached. So we'll continue looking at that. Sorry, Councillor, was there anything? Sorry, Chair, was there anything else?
Sorry, I had to tune out because my power cut is preventing my access to the agenda now as well. But I did. So I'm not sure whether you covered the point about the safe use of dual use of roads and by cycles and pedestrians.
Yeah, sorry. We have to run the development in accordance with standards that are adopted. So that's the standards that are adopted by the City Council, standards that are adopted by the County Council, and there are things called manual for streets and things, and that details all of the technical side of things in terms of how wide a cycleway and a pedestrian way has to be to make it safe for those users. And we're obviously talking about a sustainable movement-led development approach here. So whilst the dotted orange lines on the master plan, they're currently routes. So they're routes so that people can move around the estate. They're routes for people movement. What we hope is that the majority of those can actually, in the test of time, be cycle routes. There'll be dual use for people on foot and cycling, and there'll be in those scenarios they'll always be wide enough. There'll always be we'll be looking for 3.5 to 4 metre width foot and cycle routes in those circumstances where you've got those two movements going side by side, so you don't have that conflict of movement. You've got adequate space for people to cycle and go about their business. But we've got to remember, at the end of the day, this is a family estate. We're going to want people walking around in the same direction of travel as the people that are cycling, and they may have pushchairs with them. They may be in wheelchairs, etc. So we just have to make sure that those widths are adequate. If you start to segregate them, then you end up taking out all the green landscaping that you've got, because you're taking up all that space with hard landscaping to provide those separate routes. And a lot of what we want to try and achieve is within the estate roads themselves as well. So let's not ignore the fact that there are a lot of estate roads here that can provide for walking and cycling. And one of the key outcomes in terms of the design stage as we go forward is we want to look at the attributes of those estate roads. So we want to make sure that the vehicle speeds are very low, as low as we can get them. We want to make sure that those environments are people-centric, not car-centric. So we look at all of the tricks that we're able to employ in accordance with the policies and the standards that we have to work to do that. So I can't answer the question directly because a lot of that is more detailed, but in the sense that we talking about segregated routes for people walking or people cycling? I don't think we are. I think in the most part we'd be looking at combined routes, because we have to cater for a number of different movement requirements within the land that we've got available to us, and without compromising the green-led strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So just before we move on to wrap this agenda item up, which I think we're very nearly there, I wanted to remind the Policy Board of one aspect of the debate that we had last time, which was about the appropriateness of including in the master plans provision for optimal use of alternative energy sources to gas. And you'll record that we didn't hold the recommendations to Cabinet up for that purpose. But we did note very strongly our encouragement of officers to continue to have conversations with developers about that increasing trend, and to carry that forward as best they can in line with the Making Places document, which is going out for consultation. Early in today's piece, we heard that that Bloor in particular is saying, yes, indeed, they are very conscious of the Making Places document and are looking to work with the council on it. Not a commitment, clearly. And not something that we should hold up the master plan for commitment on. But I think that message continues to be loud and clear. Councillor Willis, did you want to add anything on that point?
But I didn't actually have my hand up because I was waiting for the highways matters to be completed. But yes, I mean, I think it is from now on, we should be expecting that people bringing proposals forward will be including appropriate ways of heating homes. And I was very glad to see in this application, this master plan, references to the possibilities of that. Not a commitment, and we wouldn't expect a commitment at this stage, but the fact that they need to be considering those possibilities. So yes, thank you. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to confirm that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Willis, and congratulations on what we heard at Council the other night of your increased involvement in the Council's promotion of the climate actions that we are all holding very dear to our hearts. So I'm glad that we can be positive about that in this context, at least. So I'd like to pass to Councillor McCrory, please, who's just put his hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, I was very interested to hear the representations that have been made and also the responses from both sets of officers. But I think above all, we have to recognise that we have an obligation to provide a government-imposed target of 1,000 dwellings a year. And in order to do that, we do have to have these strategic development sites coming forward. So the trick for us as members and officers is to make sure that all these sites are as sustainable in all senses of the word as possible. And I think when you look at the landscape detail that's been put before us tonight and in previous meetings, you can see that that has been taken on board very much. And when I look back over 20 years or more, when sites came forward, they would have virtually just built over the entire site. But here we have really sympathetic consideration for maintaining green corridors and green open spaces, because what we have to do in recognising the need for development, and of course our strong commitment for 35% affordable housing, which we know there's a big demand for, what we have to do is to make sure that these developments are as sustainable as possible. And I think that is being achieved insofar as we're able to at this stage of the master plan process. I was interested to hear about the hospital. I was unable to attend this morning, unfortunately, but I know there is a demand for increased parking at the hospital, and I'm sure the hospital will be only too pleased to provide extra parking because that is a very big income generator for them. But I hope that they won't do it to the exclusion of trying to maximise the use of the shuttle service at the Park and Ride. And obviously, as we know, they do subsidise that service. And I would like them to perhaps consider enhancing that service. And also, I've been pressing the County Council for some time to try and make the boarding point a bit more attractive to people who are going to hospital. At the moment, it's a very, very small shelter. So I hope Emma Featherstone can take that one on board as well. But overall, I think this is a good attempt at the master plan, and I look forward to taking it forward to the next stage and continuing to work with members and officers to get the best possible sustainable development on this site. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCrory. I too am very heartened at this stage of the process, and I know that everyone has taken note of the fact that the officers are happy to work further, will be working further of necessity as the traffic assessment leads up to the application at the planning application stage, and will go out of its way to make sure that conversations are going ahead with local residents and including the Woodhouse Lane residents, I'm sure. What I don't see today is the opportunity, is the need. I don't see the need to hold these recommendations up in the way that we did hold the Warren Farm recommendations up in order to have further traffic work done to prove the necessity for an aspect of the proposal. I think that's clear in this case. But Councillor Fuller, would you like to turn to the recommendations themselves?
Yes, can I ask the board to propose the recommendations as in the report? Thank you.
Would you like to just read them out one by one, or not one by one necessarily, but just read out what we are going to do?
The recommendations are that we recommend to Cabinet that the master plan that we have before us tonight goes before them for further recommendation. That before consideration by Cabinet, the master plan is subject to the independent quality and design review, and that the policy board delegate the Director of Sustainable Communities in consultation with the Chair, myself and the Cabinet Member for Sustainable Development to negotiate any final changes.
Thank you. And as last time, that last bit of the recommendation would include representatives from the Conservative group and the opposition group to be kept aware of those changes as they unfold.
Can I second that, Chairman?
Thank you, Councillor Soshin. Do I hear any objection or abstention? In which case, again, with my thanks to you all and to the officers involved for their participation in this debate, and the public for being present, from the public and from the parish councils. So those recommendations are carried. Now, because I've got this power problem here, Mr. Mayfield, could you walk me through to what is the next item on the agenda?
Yes, Chair, sorry, problems with my microphone. The next item, item 7, is the RAMS supplementary document. And I think, yeah, the East Coast Recreational Avoidance Disturbance Management Strategy.
Thank you very much. And I believe Claire Stuckey, it's you, Claire, is it, who's presenting this?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I shall start by sharing my screen, if that's okay, because I have a short presentation.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So good evening, members. I'm Claire Stuckey, a Principal Planner in the Local Plans team. And the purpose of this report is to update the board on the outcome of public consultation on the Essex Coast Recreational Disturbance Avoidance and Mitigation Strategy Supplementary Planning Document, which I shall shorten, if you don't mind, to RAMS SPD, and to recommend to the Council's Cabinet that the final SPD be adopted. It also provides an update on work for this Council to become the RAMS project accountable body for a period of 3 years, subject to the signing of a partnership agreement. So by way of background introduction to the RAMS, each winter, thousands of coastal birds come to feed and roost on the Essex coast. And these birds need to be able to feed and rest undisturbed if they're able to survive the winter and then fly back to their summer habitats. So a series of European designated sites are in place to help safeguard the birds and their coastal habitats, which provide them with important food and vegetation. And these include the Crouch and Roach Estuaries Ramsar and Special Protection Area, highlighted in dark green near Southwood and Ferrers in our area. Over 70,000 new homes are planned around the Essex coast over the next 15 or 20 years, and research has shown that these will lead to more people visiting the coast for recreation, sailing, paddleboarding, dog walking, etc., potentially causing additional disturbance to the protected birds. So the RAMS aims to prevent increased bird disturbance from increased recreational activities. It's a partnership of 12 Essex local authorities with support and on the natural environment. And an overarching strategy introduced by the partnership, and this was approved by this council last year. Implementation and monitoring of the measures within the RAMS will be funded by developer contributions from new homes built within certain distances of the designated sites. These are called zones of influence, and this plan shows that most of the council's area falls within one or more of these zones, including all of the adopted local plan residential site allocations. Therefore, the commitment to preparing and implementing the RAMS strategy and the RAMS SPD is set out within plan policies. So turning now to the RAMS SPD itself, this will support the delivery of the RAMS strategy by providing a consistent county-wide mechanism for securing the developer contributions, as well as practical guidance for use by local planning authorities, house builders and the public. It was published for consultation for 6 weeks in January and February of this year, and a total of 146 consultation responses were received from individuals and a range of organisations, including Natural England, the RSPB, Marine Management Organisation and Southwood and Ferrers Town Council. A summary of the main issues raised in the consultation responses and how these have been addressed in finalising the SPD is set out in section 3 of your covering report, and in more detail in the You Said We Did feedback report attached to Appendix 1. The consultation responses brought up several key themes, including some confusion about the purpose and aims of the RAMS, the scope and detail of the mitigation measures, as well as concerns about monitoring. And a number of changes have been made to the SPD to address the representations and to ensure that the SPD is clear, up to date, and will be as useful as possible. The main revisions include making it clearer from the beginning, the scope and purpose of the RAMS and SPD, providing a clearer description of how costs have been identified within the RAMS mitigation package, and clarifying how the RAMS will be monitored. The final SPD is presented in Appendix 2, members. This has been signed off by Natural England, and all 12 partner councils are expected to adopt it this year, with Braintree being the first last week. Moving now to the RAMS accountable body. To date, the money collected from developer contributions is being held separately by partner councils. But going forward, this will be pulled into a single RAMS mitigation pot to be administered by a project accountable body. And Chelmsford City Council has offered to be the initial project accountable body and to employ the project delivery officer for the first 3 years. A partnership agreement's been prepared for all of the authorities to sign up to, which will formalise these arrangements and set out how the council's costs for undertaking this role will be recovered. So in conclusion, Chair, the RAMS SPD will support the delivery of the approved RAMS strategy and adopted Chelmsford local plan. It will help to manage the recreational pressure on protected birds on the Essex coast arising from new house building, allow the council to meet its legal requirements under the habitat regulations, and ensure that the sustainable housing delivery can continue in its area. Being the accountable body will also enable the council to oversee the effective administration of developer contributions and to build on its successful track record of strategic partnership working. Thank you, Chair. I now direct members to the recommendations on page 1 of your covering report.
Thank you, Claire. And I know that we have one public statement which is going to be read out by Mr. Mayfield.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's from Mark East, and it reads, in considering the proposed RAMS SPD, I would respectfully suggest that you earnestly reflect on your legal responsibilities and the duty you owe to residents both now and into the future. Legislation in place, and he refers to the Habitats Directive 1992, is clear that the process is 3 stages, namely avoid, mitigate and compensate. The Natural Environment and Rural Communities Act 2006 stipulates that Natural England's general purpose is to ensure that the natural environment is conserved, enhanced and managed for the benefit of present and future generations, thereby contributing to sustainable development. The proposal before you is designed to speed up the processing of planning applications, allowing development to proceed with either mitigation in the form of green space or compensation in the form of money, but appears to sidestep the first step, avoid. There seems to be a general approach or view in this document that harm can't be avoided if housing is to be delivered and that there are no plausible alternatives. Reflect for one moment and consider, is it possible to deliver sufficient housing in areas outside of the zone of influence based on the most up-to-date ONS 2018 figures? If not, should there not be a level of restriction to development within the zone of influence and a far broader assessment of what would be included within the cumulative impact assessment? There appears to be little or no evidence that alternative solutions have been sought and or that this proposal is backed by sufficient scientific evidence to conclude that irreversible and significant harm will not arise to Ramsar/SPA sites within Essex. Instead, the approach has seemingly been, this is our development plan, Essex County Council, which we are not prepared to amend or reconsider, so let's write a policy so that our vision isn't interrupted. The Sweetman judgment seems clear that, to start with, you look at avoidance in any plan or project. It is incredibly well researched and documented that the role nature plays in the survival of the human race should not be overlooked, and that there is a real danger of extinction of many species within our planet. Each plays a role in the future well-being of men, women and children. It is important for a moment to disengage from any financial benefits that housing may or may not have and look at the importance of protecting the environment. I have little doubt that the authors of the planning document have sought to find a solution to a difficult subject, but with respect, I suggest it is not, in its present form, the correct solution. If step 1, avoid, was brought into the plan, and with some revisions and refinement to the overall documents, then and only then would the plan be acceptable. It has just emerged that the government intends to proceed with the consultation on changing its approach to environmental assessment and mitigation in the planning system. Would it not be prudent to defer making judgment on the policy before you now until such time that the government have finished their consultation and have provided direction on the matter? That completes the statement, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayfield. Claire, would you like to come back on that?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Chair. So Mr. East makes a number of points in his statement, and I'll endeavour to address those in turn. In terms of evidence for the Essex Coast RAMS and alternative solutions, it is important for members to note that Natural England, the government's advisor on the natural environment in England, initiated the Essex Coast RAMS, has provided advice throughout the preparation of the strategy and SPD, and have signed off both documents. There's also numerous examples elsewhere around the country of RAMS mitigation strategies that avoid and mitigate the impacts of recreational disturbance on habitat sites. These include Birdaware Solent, Birdwise North Kent and Thames Heath Basin. So whilst the RAMS is a relatively new area of conservation, there is no evidence to suggest they won't, or they don't, or they won't work. And the RAMS has also been endorsed, we should remember, by 2 now local plan inspectors for North Essex and obviously Chelmsford local plan more recently. Also, the RAMS monitoring provisions will also enable adjustments and improvements to be made to the strategy and the SPD in response to evidence during its implementation. In relation to points made about avoiding harm to sites and the people over wind judgment, the RAMS does focus on avoiding the impact of recreational pressure from additional housing on the Essex Coast to European sites, with measures such as providing information and education, waymarking to direct visitors away from sensitive areas, plus new habitat creation. And during the preparation of the Chelmsford local plan, which identified the need for the RAMS, account was taken of the people over wind judgment, and the adopted habitat regulations assessment concludes that it is consistent with that. In respect of speeding up the processing of planning applications, yes, for the vast majority of developers, it is expected that it's likely to be simpler, quicker, and less costly to make a contribution to the RAMS instead of providing bespoke mitigation themselves. So as such, it will speed up the development approval process, although this will also be alongside the delivery of a coordinated and effective mitigation, so it won't be at the expense of any harm to the protected sites. In relation to future changes to the planning system, the government have announced reforms to the planning system and the publication or the intention to publish a new planning white paper. The RAMS, however, does accord with existing prevailing policy, and we need to remember that it was recommended by and is endorsed by Natural England and supported by the 2 local plan inspectors. However, should policy change in the future, and we don't know if it will or how it might, the RAMS monitoring process will allow for adaptations or changes to be made where necessary. So overall, members, officers are satisfied that the RAMS is justified and that the SPD is ready to be adopted by this authority. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Claire. Yes, it's the same sort of mantra as we used to hear all the time in relation to waste, isn't it? reduce before you start reusing and recycling. And I must say, I didn't read this document in quite the same way as our public questioner, and I thought it did pay attention to the fact that every effort had been made at the local level to avoid undue development in sensitive sites. But I'm sure that Councillor Roberts is going to mention some aspects of that. I have his hand up on that first.
Thank you, Chairman. At least you can see me this time. I can't see you, but I can. Hopefully, people can see me. Yes, obviously, dare I mention it, Southwood and Ferrers is quite well affected by the mitigation measures that are needed and don't seem to be provided within the budget that is identified within the RAMS SPD, and I'm a bit concerned that they won't deliver it. Every time there's a recommendation to do something about the budget, it says within the report, when the delivery officer is in post, he's going to sort it out. And I don't think that's the right way to do it. And I might have the pages wrong now, but there was a comment made about alternative developers paying into RAMS. I think it was paragraph 5.2. It should be removed, because for taking Southwood and Ferrers, which has got several Ramsar sites and triple SIs right next to it, around it, in fact, not far away in Malden. For the developer of 1,500 homes, which seems to be what's happening within the master plan process now down in Southwood and Ferrers, up from 1,000. The developer can do their own mitigation by saying, oh, well, no, we've got another alternative. We'll do this, we'll do that. And I think that paragraph, which was section 5, the alternative to paying the RAM, should not be included in paragraph 5.2, or it was, unless it's been changed. I don't believe developers should be allowed to say, oh, well, no, we're only building 1,500 houses. We're not going to pay you 100 and whatever it is, pounds, £150 a house. We're only going to pay you £2 a house, because that will not give a budget to be able to carry out the things that are recommended in the report, like proper signage, access for people, which is what it's about, for people to be able to access these sites safely, easily. It talks about car parks, arranging car parks so people can park car, drive there and then go for a walk through these particular reserves. Without the funding, it won't happen. So I do still believe, and I know Southwood and Ferrers Town Council's made the comment, that paragraph 5.2 shouldn't give the option to developers to carry out their own surveys. At the end of the day, we should be responsible as a planning authority to make sure that we get it right and we get enough money in the budget to support what the RAMS SPD is saying. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take another question before going back to Claire Stuckey, if I may. Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Chair. I know it's a very minor point, but I will make it if it's okay. I do accept, and I know why they're focusing on birds for this SPD, but by using the expression mitigations necessary to protect birds of the Essex coast, I just feel that it would suggest that we're not there to protect other wildlife in the Essex coast. And clearly birds are at the top of the food chain. If we don't protect the animals lower down the food chain, then we won't have the birds. So I do feel that we should perhaps change the wording to wildlife, especially birds of the Essex coast, just to make it clear that we are there to protect all the wildlife in the Essex coast, and therefore that will lead to the protection of all the birds as well. So that's just a minor point, I'm afraid. Thank you.
That's fine. Thank you for that. Claire, you'd like to come back particularly to Councillor Roberts and also to that point of Councillor Fuller's?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. If I pick up on Councillor Fuller's point initially, the European sites have been designated predominantly for the protection of the large number of waders and wildfowl, the overwintering birds, which spend the winter on the Essex coast, and for their coastal habitats that they breed and feed on, so the mud flats and the salt marshes. But whilst the focus of the work is on these overwintering birds, it is expected that the general mitigation measures within the RAM strategy and the SPD around making people more bird aware when they're visiting and undertaking their recreational activities will help them make more responsible choices when they're visiting. So it will benefit the other wildlife, the other habitat, etc. on the coast. But the RAM strategy is drafted alongside the SPD because the actual European designations are focused on protecting the birds and their habitat rather than general wildlife in the main, although they will naturally benefit as well through the measures within the RAMS itself. Okay, so if I now go to Councillor Roberts' points, he made a number of issues there. In terms of the mitigation measures within the strategy and the costs for those, they have been, I have been calculated based on the number of forecast dwellings around the Essex coast, together with the identification of the mitigation measures. So the tariff has been set to enable the measures to be funded in their entirety by the proposed new housing that's forecast within Essex. And the contribution is not necessarily set too high in our view to make development unviable, but it's set at a level which will enable the measures that have been identified to be effective at reducing increased recreational disturbance, as we know that increased recreation will happen along the coast in the future. In terms of developers being able to provide their own mitigation measures rather than pay the tariff directly, that is the case. It is a voluntary scheme. However, as I outlined in the presentation, in most cases, it's expected that developers will find it easier and cheaper and quicker to pay the RAMS tariff. And that is certainly the experience from other RAMS mitigation projects elsewhere in the country. Developers aren't required, it's not mandatory to pay the tariff. If they do decide to provide their own bespoke mitigation measures, they would need to undertake full consultation both with us, but also with Natural England. And those measures would have to also be evidence-based, hence the reason that could speed up, that could delay the consent for their development going forward and add additional costs to them as organisations. In terms of where the mitigation measures will happen and the types and where they will be focused, that is outlined within the RAM strategy document itself. There's a table within that document which identifies various themes and the focuses for those and the timescale for those within the first 5, 10 and 15 years of the project. The key to the RAMS is the rangers, which will be appointed with a role to visit the coast and liaise with the visitors, informing users about appropriate bird-aware behaviours to minimise impact. Those rangers will, there'll initially be 2, but there are budgets for further rangers in the future, and they will cover the whole of the coastline. So that will include the coastline around South Woodham and the special protection area at the Crouch and Roach estuaries. And we are hoping to recruit the rangers if we can this year, and that's subject to the successful collection of enough tariff contributions. But they will work the entire coastline, as a lot of the other measures also will cover the whole of the habitat sites identified, signage, waymarking, habitat creation, that kind of thing. I hope that covers Councillor Roberts' points and Councillor Fuller's, but do correct me if I'm wrong.
Thank you. What I was hearing, I'm getting an echo, I hope other people aren't. What I was hearing was that actually the developers will have less wriggle room than perhaps Councillor Roberts fears. And am I not right also that in our local plan itself, there are quite strong measures which are policy in this respect to ensure that the developers abide by certain underlying principles, and that we would expect the master plans that are relevant to the Chelmsford area to look at this SPD as a very substantive piece of supplementary planning guidance in that respect. I don't know whether that satisfies Councillor Roberts, who I know has his hand up again, but I'd appreciate the confirmation or otherwise that that is the case. But before that, I also have Councillor Moore's hand up, if I may.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for the delay. I just wanted to broaden this. There's a bird aware document that I was looking at, because I was also aware of the terminology that seemed to be around birds rather than habitat. But I was reassured to read that most of the Essex coast is designated under the UK Conservation of Habitats and Species Regulations 2017, the subsection Habitats Regulations is the detail. And that's part of a European Natura 2000 network, which is a series of sites across Europe. And so within that, the key purpose of that is that the designations is to protect internationally important numbers of breeding and non-breeding birds and their coastal habitats. So there obviously are protections in place for habitats, and it's evidently vital that we need to maintain those habitats year round so that they're ready for the arrival of those migrating birds. But I was reassured that there does seem to be more wraparound protection for those areas. I hope that's helpful to the councillors.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Can I go back to Claire, if I may?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Moore is absolutely right in terms of her references to the habitat regulations, the Natura 2000 network. The 10 designated European sites are part of that network. That's another name for them. And just in terms of the Bird Aware brand, the Essex Coast Rams is part of the Bird Aware message. It was developed by another Rams mitigation partnership, but we have bought into that as a partnership as well. And as part of that, we have a dedicated, really user public-friendly website, which gives lots of information about the Rams, the strategy, loads of information about the various birds that are protected on the coast, and lots of strong messaging about how to behave in a way that will minimise disturbance. So we're pleased that we're already part of that Bird Aware brand. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And before I go back to Councillor Roberts, could you tell me whether I have it right that actually, when one takes into account our local plan and the planning application process, the master plan process and the application process that will apply to the South Woodham area, that some of Councillor Roberts' concerns may be taken care of, and that there's less wriggle room for the developer than perhaps he fears? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, so we've got a number of hooks within the adopted local plan requiring consideration of mitigation measures. Obviously, we're favouring the application of the RAMS itself and payment towards that wider strategic strategy, although we can't enforce it, as you say, it's a bespoke project. Because South Woodham Ferrers allocation to the north of the existing town is so close to one of the protected sites and the Essex coast, they will have to look at whether additional measures over and above those required through the RAMS will be necessary. So they will have to take, and the policy requires this, an additional habitat regulations assessment just for that development itself. That will be carefully looked at by officers at the City Council and Natural England. And in light of that, they may need to provide additional measures on the development site to avoid recreational harm to the coast. So, for instance, some measures provided elsewhere include adequate walking and cycling routes, particularly for dog walkers, which avoid the need to visit the coast, etc. So yes, there certainly is provision within the local plan that is requiring the development north of South Woodham to go a bit further potentially, in addition to contributing towards the RAMS. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Roberts.
Yes, Chairman. You're definitely disappearing into the blackness. It's like the black abyss wherever you are. Yes, I'm partially reassured by the officers, Claire's comments about it will be looked at in much more detail when we get to the planning application on the plan. I was also pleased, incidentally, back in 2018 when, of course, the inspector of our local plan said it had to be included, and in fact I think it was in its embryo state then. And I think on that note, I think we just got to take an assurance. I can assure you, if I'm still here when the planning applications start to pour in for 1,500 homes, I shall be mentioning RAMS on several occasions. And just as a final comment, we now got some black swans on the river, and they normally live in Australia, so they are a long way from home. So we do not really want them to be disturbed. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I'm reassured, and I will vote for the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Are there any other comments from members of the board on this particular item? If not, do I have a proposer of the recommendations, please?
I can propose that, Chairman.
Thank you. And a seconder?
Yes.
Seconded.
Thank you very much. May I assume that we're all in favour, or does anyone wish to register a vote against or an abstention? Thank you. Yes, so I can't see my paperwork here, as you can tell, but I believe the next item on the agenda is the work programme for the board, which Mr. Potter is going to introduce, I believe.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So I won't take very long, but I just wanted to pick out a couple of items. Agenda item 10 sets out the work programme, the next meeting being the 1st of October. And actually quite timely, the master plan in relation to the land to the north of South Woodham Ferrers is programmed to come back to Policy Board at its next meeting. I think the consultation finishes tomorrow in relation to that master plan. We are going to be bringing that forward for members to be looking at in terms of the consultation responses, and also in relation to what we've got in the new master plan. The other items on the 1st of October, we do intend to bring forward to you a review of our local development scheme, and that sets out a timetable, more detail on the timetable for the review of the local plan. Members will be aware that the local plan, a policy in the local plan states that consultation on the review would need to start in 2022, and there is a statutory requirement for us to review our plan every 5 years. And also 2 other items in relation to an update on the garden community. So you've heard a little bit today about the North East garden community. So we felt that it was timely to bring the policy board up to speed on where we are on that master plan. So it won't necessarily be the detail of that, it's the project, the programme for providing that detail, when we're hoping that the actual final master plan will be coming before you sort of probably in the summer of next year. There is still a lot of work to do on that. And also, we heard a little bit in the last item about the government's new planning paper, policy paper, or white paper. So we're programmed in to the 1st of October, because we do expect that to come forward by the end of this month, we've been told. And then into November, we have the planning obligations supplementary planning documents going out on consultation. And you'll recall, I think actually Councillor Roberts made the point at a previous meeting, when they're going out on consultation, they have been held back in relation to the statement of community involvement that you agreed at the beginning of the first half of this meeting last week. So that went on consultation on Tuesday. So very grateful for members for approving that and getting that out very quickly. That's all out on consultation at the moment, and I hope you've seen some of the consultation material that accompanies that. I suppose the only thing I'd also want to say, in addition, the rest of the items are there and members can see that, is that St Peter's, there's a master plan that is currently on consultation on St Peter's site. That site is following a slightly different process in terms of the master plan, because there was an existing planning brief that was a couple of years old now on that St John's site, and Essex Housing, who are the kind of development arm of Essex County Council, have kind of done their own master plan process. And so we'll be reviewing that and having a look and see how that fits into our master plan process, the one that you members have agreed, City Council members, and seeing how we can fit that into the timetable. So I haven't got that slotted in, but hopefully by the next meeting, we'll have that programmed in for you to be able to have a look at the St Peter's master plan. I think that's probably all from me for the moment, Chair. Everything's probably hopefully self-explanatory, but very happy to take any questions that any members have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have Councillor Roberts, and then Councillor Sosin, and then Councillor Whitehead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bearing in the amount of time we've taken on the master plans that we've dealt with, which is a considerable amount of time, I think we need to be making sure that the agendas are not overloaded with stuff, because we really only needed one master plan on this agenda, which we're just finishing tonight, to get it done in an evening. We can't do too much in an evening, and I'm greatly concerned that we will try and rush things when we deal with these master plans and neighbourhood plans which are coming along and other things. So I think we need to be careful deliberation on what goes on the agenda, and if necessary, Chairman, perhaps there ought to be consideration to have an extra meeting somewhere in the middle if we've got to meet a programme. But if you're sitting here rushing and it getting towards 10 o'clock, just stopping is not a good idea. So I think careful looking at the schedule might need to be your task for today or tomorrow anyway.
Thank you for that. Councillor Sosin.
I wanted to make exactly the same point, so I won't say any more.
Thank you. Councillor Whitehead.
Thanks, Chairman. I was going to make the same point as well, which I entirely agree with, which takes us back to the Warren Farm one. What is actually happening now on that? Are we to reconsider it after various further work has been done? I've been getting emails from local residents there asking that question, and a question was asked of council the other night as well. Did we finally agree that it would come back to this committee before it goes to cabinet? I'm not sure, and I think others are not sure either.
Yeah, thank you for that, all of you. I mean, you're all thinking the same thoughts as I've been thinking and talking to Mr. Potter and Mr. Nicholson about already. We've adopted the schedule of meetings which was there previously, but the workload of the policy board is considerably greater than it might otherwise be if it was specifically following the brief of the previous Development Policy Committee. So I'm perfectly aware that both the number of meetings and the length of the agendas and the proximity or otherwise of the meetings themselves to cabinet meetings and the paperwork deadlines for cabinet does need to be under review, and I would reassure the board that that's certainly the case. In relation to Warren Farm, the draft minutes of the last meeting, of course, haven't been published because this is the same meeting that's going along now. But my recollection, which Mr. Mayfield will correct me on if I'm wrong, is that the wording was that the further work would be carried out, as we were discussing last time, and would be coming back to an emergency meeting of the policy board if necessary. And at the time, one sensed that it was necessary, although could be done remotely, even more remotely, or by email than this. So the basic answer to your question, Councillor Whitehead, is yes, indeed, it is due to be coming back. But other councillors agree with you and with me that the work programme needs to be kept a very careful eye on. Mr. Potter.
Yes, I do agree with members, and obviously the work programme that you see before you was kind of programmed before the meeting last week. So we will need to review it. I think what's important is that this work programme is under constant review. I think you're absolutely right. We wouldn't want to have more than one master plan on a meeting. I think that's clear. And also, I think if we have a master plan on the meeting, if we do have other items, then I think they need to be relatively, you know, not the big weighty items to sort of counterbalance the master plan. Obviously, there will always be time-bound issues, so there may be stuff that we will need to bring to you because of a consultation response or a deadline. So we need to be mindful of that, but we will endeavour to ensure, in hindsight and looking at the practice that we've seen over the last couple of weeks, that we manage the business of the meeting carefully. Thank you.
Yeah, so two things in that context. I think that first of all, that we are playing catch up to a certain extent, and it wouldn't normally have been the case that we had two master plans coming at the same time. But the consideration of both of those master plans has indicated that this board, I'm delighted to say, does want to pay attention to it and is beginning to understand the process of master planning and being able to distinguish between what happens at that stage and what happens later. And the thing which was very, very helpful, certainly for me and I know for others, was to have had that briefing or training session, whichever you want to call it, about the current state of affairs with those two master plans well in advance, in fact, during the consultation periods, in effect, or shortly after the consultation period, so that members were already briefed with the ins and outs of some of the aspects of the master plan and could review it in detail at the board meeting with that much more ease. So I would encourage those briefing sessions to be built into the programme outside the meetings of the board itself. Can I take silence as a yes, Mr. Potter?
Sorry, yes, absolutely. I mean, the programme in terms of briefings is set like that. We will do the similar sort of thing that we've done for the two that you've considered, and we'll fit that into the programme. Obviously, as I said, we need to be mindful that the developers want to keep moving, and we don't want to be unnecessarily holding up. But I think in light of the level of interest and the level of scrutiny, which is exactly the role of the policy board, we want to ensure that members have that time to be able to really fully assess these master plans coming for you. So we carefully consider that. We make sure that the presentations are programmed, and we will do a review of this. We might be able to. I mean, what might be quite good, Chair, with your agreement, is maybe have a look at this, and rather than waiting till October, maybe we can kind of issue this informally to members in terms of in a draft form to just see what's coming up in light of what we've just discussed tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and I'm sure that would be very helpful. And as you say, it is a programme which needs to be constantly under review, and members too of all parties I know are keen to see these plans progress. The sites having been allocated and the plan having been adopted, we need to see the economy beginning to get underway in a construction sense, and we need to see the houses being built, because it's the housing crisis which is one of the things alongside the climate emergency that we're trying to address in the best way that we can. So thank you for that. Is the work programme noted?
Noted.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mayfield, is there any other urgent business?
No, there isn't, Chair.
And what needs to go from here to Cabinet?
The two master plans will need to go on, Chair, including the RAM strategy will be going on to the Cabinet in September.
Thank you for that, and we'll hear in due course how the work is progressing on the particular aspect of the Warren Farm development that we called for last time. So on that note, unless there are any other points, can I thank you all very much indeed, public and officers and other councillors and members of the board and others, and see you all soon.
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Good night.
Put a shilling in the meter next time, though, won't you?
I know a good electrician.
Good night. Bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.